Testing 1, 2, 3. We got some audio here. All right. Okay. All right. As I was saying, no Kellen this morning. She's in the midst of traveling. Friday, we didn't get to talk a lot about anything about what was happening, with Texas or any of the legislature kind of jumping out and heading over to Illinois. And so we'll hit that all today. So if you want to comment during the program today, I'll bring your thoughts and opinions onto the show. The phone number 330-595-1600 if you want to get on the program. Right off, so let's kind of bring everybody up to speed on what we know. This is going to be a freaking interesting week. A lot of drama is going to happen. Today there is a press conference. President Trump is going to be talking about the crime in D.C., the homelessness in D.C. And I know a lot of you don't know the role that D.C. plays in the political scheme. Is it a state? Does it contribute? Does it have a governor? What role it plays in things. I mean, I guess most of us kind of got the indication like on January 6th when there was, riots outside the Capitol during the post-election scene, whether or not, we can send National Guard troops into D.C., whether or not the mayor has to be complicit in that dispatching. So really what Trump said over the weekend was that we got to clean up D.C. The violent crime, the homelessness is a blight on it. And from personal experience, when I am forced or have to drive around the D.C. area, it hurts my stomach. Like it's not something that I feel good about when I drive through that area. The concentration of money that flows through a city that's not even really a city, it breaks my heart because what's happening there. Everything that you fear about what government is illustrated when you drive through. And the packing the Supreme Court and making DC a state and the political advantage that goes along with that. How should DC be treated? Is it, in Trump, a couple of his statements over the weekend, is treating it more like, hey, this is federal property. It should have government assets on it. Nobody should really live there or do business there. It shouldn't even really have crime except for the ones that are happening within the halls of Congress. It should just be, like a state park. And so Trump is thinking sending National Guard troops there, taking over the situation with curfews and regulations and just cleaning up what is the territory of the federal government. Now, here's what I foresee. I think it's a good idea that the National Guard troops should, help municipalities and states and anyone who is suffering from crime problems. It does not help an area to be riddled with it. I was just over the weekend went to Walmart. Unfortunately, had to go there to pick up some tools, and right across from the Walmart, in a parking lot that was behind a grocery store, there's a little homeless encampment, plastic chairs, bags of personal belongings, a place to set up food, a place to sleep. And I'm thinking, like, why is this allowed? Like, if I were just to go into a parking lot and set up camp and say, this is my home, like, how is that even allowed? It two parts to it. Let me first address the necessity of people without homes, separate from where do you put these people if they don't have homes? So what leads to homelessness? What makes it necessary for someone to stand out on a street corner and to hole up in a back alley or, take refuge in a parking lot somewhere? That's one issue. Now, as a society, what do you do with those people? How do you help them? How do you get them into, stable, as a stable renter, a homeowner, or a participant in society? So that's one element, and I've got my personal feelings on that. But the, going through a city, rounding up homeless people and putting them in some agriculture, some field, put them in a field and have them fend for themselves, find, some psychological help for the people. Do you pair them with, financial professionals to help them, get their shit together? Like, what leads to this? Is it drugs? Is it mental illness? Finding out what the root cause of the problem, and do people just have the right to be homeless if that is where the decisions lead them? And, again, my personal feeling is, as a human being, I want to help these people. I want to audit their lives and find out what decisions they're making and find out what led them to the place that they're in, help them make different decisions and lead them to something that is more stable, whether or not that's churches, group homes, volunteers that, open their garages or spare rooms or backyards or whatever. I think these people need sort of like one-on-one personal help, somebody who is ahead of them in the game that can help them make better decisions. And so when someone's like, hey, you know what, it's 9:00 in the morning and shit's bad. I want to, make life better. Should I shoot heroin? And then have a reasonable person say, yeah, you know what, heroin's not probably your best play today. There are better options than heroin. Maybe we rake leaves, mow lawns, try to get a job, whatever, and give a runway of someone that can assemble enough good decisions that lead them to a place where they can find housing. So if you got, like what did California do when you had Asian leaders come in? Well, they cleaned them up. All right, well, let's pay attention. Who's modeled this? Who has a big homelessness problem? Why does it happen? And what do they do with the people when they clean them up, in quotes? Do they just stick them in a different dark alley, or are they looking to solve the problem? And it seems like that if it exists in every city, no matter where you go, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Columbus, no matter what, you find people that are unhomed. And it would be easy enough to get our religious leaders and our political leaders to have an understanding of what causes it. And then once they have a spreadsheet that says what the cause of homelessness is, that they start working on it. Instead of it being a political issue where you pick your favorite political angle and make that the reason. So yes, property values are very high. Renting is very high. There's a lack of low income housing that doesn't participate in the stemming problem. So if you go to low income housing, is there evidence there that all the things that causes homelessness are also there in public housing? So if you want a real cleanup, you actually have to have engineers without bias go and find the original problem and, shame and hold accountable the people for making those decisions. And, it's one thing for you to have like a hard edge punishment or consequence for making bad decisions. But then if the result is that those consequences are that you have homeless people, that's part of the part you have to engineer out of. And so this week we'll probably see the National Guard start to clean up and set curfews in Washington, D.C., clean up the crime, clean up the drugs, clean up the prostitution, clean up the homelessness. And, I'm interested to see how far they're willing to take it. If we can model DC as what we do with that. I mean, when I was a kid, you actually had mental institutions, people who just could not conduct themselves in regular society. You sent them to mental institutions and try to rehab some of these people to, graduate back into society again. I think that's a really good idea. Now, if mental institutions and prisons are hard to distinguish between, where there's no rehab going on and it's a way to just store people, like those are human beings, and to just warehouse a bunch of human beings that are difficult to process into your, your culture and your civilization. There need to be smart people that are engineering our way out of this as well. So this is sort of like a byproduct of really the dumbest amongst us are in decision making, and instead of our academics and our specializations that could solve these problems, we need to invest in our communities. And that's not a catchphrase and a cliche. Investment doesn't necessarily mean just throwing money at something, but you have people that are legitimately interested in solving a problem. And when you are given those people are given license to actually solve the problem instead of making it a political football, you might see some kind of advantage given back to the rest of us. Because honestly, if we have nothing but murder, crime, homelessness, drug use that are a blight to our societies, the residents of those societies have an interest in helping clean that up and making it better. And rather than investing in, it breaks my heart when, the U.S. government gives money to some sub-Saharan African country to help with something, but then ignores the problems that are in our own cities. But so this is an opportunity to model how you clean up a city, and not doing it from an unempathetic standpoint, doing it from a science and academic standpoint is what I'm really interested in. Do I have hope that that's the direction that we're going to take? Absolutely not. I don't think that we're going to take this opportunity. I think it's going to be just something else in politics where the Democrats are going to pounce as, the authoritarian is coming in and using National Guardsmen and the military to solve a problem. When do you really think the finesse of the military and National Guard is what it's going to take to clean up a problem? I think not. But Trump's going to make the moves. The Democrats are going to make the moves. It's basically what it comes down to is whoever's going to move faster. If the Democrats frame this as an authoritarian control of a city or a territory, a federal territory like DC is, then the Democrats win. If the Trump moves fast enough, cleans it up, and I already saw memes this morning about how DC has solved some of their problems and lowered crime and whatnot. So the game is on, and it's a political game. So we'll see what comes out of Washington, D.C. Also, the federal government's prosecution of some of the previous administration's coup attempt on the Trump administration, whether it be Comey, Obama, Comer, all of that class, even including Hillary Clinton, and how it was justified to use the federal government to stand against a president that was duly elected, and what ends that they were willing to go to. So do you have any faith that the prosecutions and the indictments and holding these people accountable is a real thing? I sure as hell don't. I don't think that we have it in us to prosecute. I mean, when it comes to Trump and the 34 felony indictments when he was running, we had some backbone, we had some balls. But when it comes to taking aim at other people who have done that and worse, I just don't think we have that fortitude to come through on it. So we'll see what today brings. It's going to be interesting to see what that comes out of it. But I really want to get to the Texas stuff, because that stuff, I'm legitimately fascinated with, because it sort of like outs a compromise in what the public is willing to deal with. The gerrymandering is probably the number one part of the equation, and how Rush Limbaugh at one point said that politicians' first objective above all things is to be reelected, given political advantage, accumulating the power to stay doing political things, because it's a good deal. I don't know if you know this, but politicians don't have to do a lot, and they get paid handsomely for not doing a lot. You don't even have to be all that smart. You can be the dumbest amongst us and get a representative position. Me as a libertarian, or has a bent towards federalism and libertarianism, I look back to the spirit of what the true genius of the people who founded this country had in mind when they started engineering and orchestrating, the United States of America. And so gerrymandering is interesting when you look at it through a lens of, if you're a politician, what is gerrymandering? When you're in control, gerrymandering is a really strategic move, right? You give your party an advantage. You carve out territories that will give your opponent a disadvantage. And, you can make it seem like the minority view is the majority view. And if you were to, when you audit things down and say, okay, well, does every group have a equal right to representation? Does a farmer have an equal right to a urban dweller? Does a scientist have equal rights? So representation in government means that when you forge out the people who go to the halls of the House of Representatives, whether or not your voice can be heard by your elected representative. So through gerrymandering, every state is guilty of this. Almost every state is guilty of this. And if, what should it be? When you draw lines on a state diagram of taking different districts of the state, what should be the considerations? Should it be political advantage, or should it be representation? Should you draw a big box around a bunch of farmers and you get a farmer representative to government? If you take a ethnic group, should you have your representative be an ethnic group? If you have a racial class, should a racial class be representative? And where is the hierarchy of what's most important for democratic representation in the federal government? So if you're, we'll use the state of Texas. Do you think that the state of Texas is, if you redistrict, cut out, whatever amount it is, like maybe I've heard anywhere from 5 representatives to 12 representatives, or a 19-point swing in the representative government. Is it righting the ship, or is it just taking the swing of the pendulum and moving it in the Republicans' direction? Well, for a Democrat, you think, well, yeah, this is absolutely, Democrats are going to have hell to pay if they lose 19 voices in the halls of Congress. And if you're a Republican, you're like, well, no. It was jacked up before, and this is just making it a little bit more right than it was prior to this. And it takes an unbiased, nonpartisan, reasonable person to look at your lines and see what you were trying to accomplish, knowing that the spirit of states districting is up to the state, but the spirit is that, your state gets to decide who gets represented for your state. And if it goes too far in one direction, where it was just about number of House seats, I even saw this morning, House of Representatives, if you were to ungerrymander all states and just do have AI drought districts of common interests, setting the priority being what the legislature can affect those districts. How many seats would the Republicans hold? I saw 250 Republican seats and 180 Democrat seats, or around that part. So if you did it unbiased, there would be a huge slant to Republicans. And is that the will of the spirit of districting? Would the Democrats say, hey, if the unbiased approach was where we just drew districts where we're no slanting for political purposes, if it's that heavy in Republican view, would I be able to support the unbiased approach when I have so much to lose? And Republicans would be frothing at the prospect of getting so much representation that they'd be like, yeah, this is freaking awesome. Let's get this thing done. And so the real political matter at this point is, this is a debate and a battle that happens within the state. And you had 50 plus representatives of Democrat persuasion leave the state. And without their 50 plus seats, the state house in Texas could not convene. And therefore the redistricting and gerrymandering of Texas could not take place. So who's a bigger asshole in this? Is it the people who are derelict in their duty when Democrats lose and they don't have enough representation to fight up against something? Is the play to just leave to another state? Or is it that you suck it up, know you lost the election, know that you're giving up gerrymandering, try harder next time, and play the game straight up? Democrats really invested in the Constitution or the rule of law, or someone who hates the Constitution working around it and not following the letter of the due process. Well, the due process is if you're in the minority, you lose a lot more than if you're in the majority. So you got to go get a majority in order to win more. That's just the due process of any legislature. And so the 50 plus Democrats should show up. They should take their L. They should lose their districts, and it should piss people off enough for Democrats to get incited to vote more often and vote more people, into office so that they can regain the majority. But if it's gerrymandered, then you have little cause or hope that Democrats could even be, elected. So the plus is that I think that it's so absurd and it's so dramatic that things are likely to change because of the entropy that is now in the topic. The downside is that the Democrats are taking the worst version of this. They fight these things headlong into the ideology, and this is the case of like the Voting Rights Act. They take a racial perspective on this, and I don't think this is the proper play. I think you take the straight up play like I did, reasonable, that a skewed legislature in any direction where it's not about 50-50 means that party is going to have a runaway advantage. And it's, having a mob of any flavor is not good for the process. So, but the reasonable people need to say, okay, I'm either going to play the political game and do it straight up and take my losses and reconvene and do it the right way, or, you're going to the political way and say, hey, you know what? The goal is to get power. And if I have to get power, that's the way that I'm going to take this. And I think no matter what, the drama is not done. So the governor of Texas did 4 or 5 things. I'll count them. So number one is the warrants out for the rest of the 50 plus Democrats who are holed up in Chicago. Mostly symbolic. I don't necessarily think that the state of Illinois is going to extradite these people so that they can show up in Congress. So yes, it matters, but it doesn't have much in the way of teeth. Number 2 is a $500 fine that can be levied against these Democrat legislators to come back to Texas and do their job, or they're going to be fined $500 a day. Now, I've seen on social media there are plenty of people who are going to pay their fines so that they can continue to delay the inevitability of the redistricting of Texas. And number 3 is no payment. And so direct deposit for the wages of a government official. You can't collect a check unless you come in person. And if you're in Illinois, you're not going to be collecting a check. So the power of the purse is meant to put pressure on, come back, collect your check, and do your job and duty as a legislator. And I do have to point out the contrast. And if any of us, we decided to throw a tantrum and leave work and not do our job, it would be of higher priority to fire the shit out of you if you decided not to show up for your job. No matter if you felt you were justified in not showing up or you had great reasons to show up, if you don't show up, you got to be fired to bring somebody in to do your job. And so the next element that the governor of Texas threw out there was vacating those seats and filling them. Now, there are a couple of them. If you're got a House seat and your district's going to be gone anyway, Jasmine Crockett was one of those where the district is likely to change and her seat is likely to go away in the next session. You've got nothing to lose because you're unemployed and you can't even be elected because your district's about to go bye-bye. So for her to stay away, I could totally see her taking that angle on it. But for the rest of them, the people who will have a district to come back to, we'll see how hard and how long they can keep that line with that extra pressure. And it'll keep getting ratcheted up. I do believe that eventually they'll come back because I think they played this game a couple of years ago. But you kind of got to look at it from a philosophical standpoint and looking through the eyes and the behaviors of your opponent. What if your opponent was doing this to you? What if Democrats had control of California and all of a sudden the Republicans decided to say, all right, well, we're out. We're going to go elsewhere. What would your angle be on them? Would you be taking a counter view? Would you say, well, you got to do your job and, get to work? And even those Republicans, would you be like, hey, it's justified. Like we have a true minority and we can't win this battle. And our only play is to, go to another state and disrupt the process. It's a little bit different of an angle. Now, us principled people, no matter what side is doing it, you elect a principle and you stick to it no matter who's doing it. So if you have a job and you're being paid to do it, you show up and do your job and take your L. That's my perspective. And I don't care if it's a Republican or Democrat doing it. Julie says, how about New Orleans gerrymandering? Elections would be more how about no gerrymandering? Elections would be competitive based on policies only. And, when Lauren Matthews was here, we were talking about how you do it, how you rip politics out of it and make it so that it isn't gerrymandered, writing in your mission statement. And I think that if everybody knew what the process of gerrymandering was and what it should be, and then had a nonpartisan group that had 0% chance of using it. So if I were, so as an engineer and a programmer, if I were to want to make sure that my AI didn't bring biases into the equation, I would have to program the defenses against biases into the logic, right? And so how do you do that? Well, number one is only giving data that is necessary to the logic or to the AI. So if I didn't want it to consider someone's opinion, I would deprive it of the data on opinion. So if I wrote in my logic that said, I want a state to have a hierarchy of interests, who should be represented in government? Should it be Republicans, Democrats? Should it be males, females? Should it be black, white? Should it be Republicans, Democrats? What are the interests and what's important to the majority of the people? And the state decides what that hierarchy is. And then we're like, okay, well, here's the hierarchy. I want you to draw a map that has 17 districts that the hierarchy is this: commerce, industrial, political, socioeconomic. And if we can agree on what the hierarchy should be, then an AI could totally pick that out. But so long that we can't, I don't necessarily think that if you put it up to vote, what the hierarchy should be. Should it be, what if it was randomness? What if you took a state and said, randomly draw this state into 17 equally populated areas, and those are our districts? Would that be better than the hyper-partisan districts than there were? I would say that would be a good first beginning, right? And then you can add some sophistication after your AI was able to draw those laws just based on I don't care who you are. I don't care where you work. I don't care what your interests are. It's basically saying there are 60 million people. There are 15 districts. I want you to draw lines around every 2 million people. I argue that it would be better than where we were at today. Could it be made better through some more, data points and more logic? For sure. Now let's separate it and say who should have a voice. Okay, so what do they do when they go to the state house? They enact laws that, let's just say 80% is regulations and 20% of it is social programs. Okay, well, now we tell the AI, go out to the same data set, and I want you to take an interest on industries, representative industries. So if you have farm workers versus service workers versus financial workers, divvy it up so each one of those groups within the same subset is equally represented, with population numbers still being an element. But instead of 2 million random people in each group, let's put those groupings in consecutive, order. So you don't want Toledo and Columbus to be in the same district. So you almost need to have a grouping, but group it then by similar industries, but also a 20% weight on, social programs and feeding people, healthcare, housing, and so on and so forth. So, but you can add some of the sophistication after you've done the first part, which is let's first rip the bias out of it. And you've seen, Illinois was a good illustration. I watched the Sunday shows, and Pritzker was talking to mainstream media, desk clerk here, and the question was asked: how can you put the emphasis on gerrymandering in Texas when Illinois is equally gerrymandered? And Pritzker's response, and this is very telling from a politician, is he said, well, that's just a distraction. Instead of countering it with why your gerrymandering is better than Texas's gerrymandering. Because if I'm a politician and I come out and say, a reasonable politician, and I say, you know what, we got to work on that. We got to make Illinois just as good as the principles that I'm looking to inflict on Texas. We got to shore up gerrymandering no matter what it is. But the problem is, the reason that you're muted is that you only have a problem with gerrymandering that works against you, and you're willing to tolerate gerrymandering that works for your political party. And that's when I don't want to hear anything you have to say. Even if you've got good points, F you and your partisan angle on it. I want reasonable people who are like, okay, we disagree with it in principle, so let's apply it uniformly. But do you want to be the first state to end gerrymandering? So do you want to take Texas and remove gerrymandering when you've got New York, California, Illinois, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and all of these other states that are going to keep doing it? Well, why would I do that? Why would I give up the advantage of having it gerrymandered when nobody else is going to do it? So it's almost got to be federal. And as much as I freaking hate anytime the federal government regulates something, right, they can actually orchestrate it so that it all happens at the same time and then bow out and go do something else. That consolidation, the minute that they're not looking, is going to happen again. So I think it's a natural occurrence, and I'm undecided whether or not I just want, the voting groups to figure it out amongst themselves and to model it when you have, California super willing to say, well, if Texas is going to do it, I'm going to do it. And it just degrades down to what 5-year-olds would do on a playground. And, it doesn't speak very highly of our civilization and our culture to be so willing to act sophomoric when it is in our, when it's in our advantage. So thank you, Julie, for that comment. And I'm with you on principle. I think gerrymandering should be rooted out. But first, before we do that, I think it has to be rooted in some kind of universal truth, not partisan truth, but universal truth about what should be. I think we had a really good bead on things before AI. I really think we did. And even in the 80s and 90s, I think we had a better understanding about what unbiased actually meant and what reasonable people, the definition of reasonable people even were. Like if you can get two people that disagree on things, send them into the room and not let them leave until they can have some kind of compromise, I think that is the reasonable approach. And when is the last time you can think politically that happened? That you truly knew what each player was going into the room with their interests in mind and finding out a fair compromise that was uncorrupted fair compromise. And what I mean by that is when, our legislature meets and they make a compromise, it means like you give up a portion of your principle and I'll give up a portion of mine, and that's ends up being the compromise rather than dialing something back. So for instance, if a legislator had an idea for something and they were like, here's the deal, we're going to take $1 billion from every billionaire and we're going to give it equally for every homeless person that's in the United States. They believe in it, they think it'll work. And then you have a person that says, we don't steal from people and take their $1 billion and give it to somebody else. Let's both of us go into a room and come up with a compromise that does not mean that either person gets their way. You have a reasoned approach between the two. You reach homeostasis between warring opinions, and you come up with an option that solves some of your problem while you give up something that you really wanted, and vice versa. And I think that art of that deal is dead because politics is redefined compromise as I get something I want, you get something you don't want. You don't have to dial anything back. And I don't know. I think that strategy is dead in politics for now. 330-595-1600 if you want to get on it. Welcome everybody. This is Youngstown's Talk Channel. Thanks for letting me get that off my chest, off the onset with what we're about to experience today. And speaking of AI, little bit of this is connected in a way that we talk about homelessness as the people who, for whatever reason, have not been able to merge into traffic to prosperity, whether or not it be bad decisions or a lack of knowledge or drug use or mental illness, whatever those are. You're still going to have a big group of people who are not going to be able to join with everyone else. And everyone else is going to be like, hey, it's so easy. Come on over here. And everybody in it like, it's unobtainable. I can't get there. And you have this disconnection. And the more people that arrive in that homeless camp, no pun intended, that it's harder to then rehab those people to join it, because it's not just the person that is incongruent with the prosperity, but the environment or the infrastructure is moving further away. So as we contemplate AI, we're going to displace a bunch of people. I mean, picture a 60-year-old right now, and let's just say tomorrow AI starts taking over everything. And go back to the 90s when the advent of the computer and digital things were done. I had a bunch of people that said, I'm not doing digital. I'm just going to stay on paper. I'm comfortable. I know what works. I'm not going out and learning that stuff. Those people immediately assumed a disadvantage when it meant competing with people who then were doing digital, because they could do things faster. They can do it better, more organized, with more accuracy. So you chose the disadvantage because I don't really want to change. And you can't take 340 million people in a country and expect all of them are going to be willing to change towards the new thing that's happening. So you get this separation between the people who do not want, to merge, and you have the people who are like, I've got to adapt into this, and I got to get good at this, and I got to figure out how to use it to my advantage. Well, digital and computers and the information age and digital banking and digital everything was a small separation. But AI creates a massive separation. And part of the dangers of AI is, like my kid and I, we're programmers. So we spend our weekends writing code and calculating numbers and creating things in the digital space. So we make computers do more things based on what we encode into them. Well, we're talking about AI and how it then takes the programmers, something that would, it used to take us, I would say, about 2 or 3 weeks to put together a pretty simplistic program. All right. Just because you had to organize it, you had to write your code, create your variables, create the graphics that go along with it, develop the user experience and make it a tool that was useful to the person that was going to be able to use it. And that was a long process. Well, if I can go to AI, I can go to OpenAI, I can go to Grok, I can go to Gemini, I can go to all these tools that now we have at our disposal. I can shrink our 3 week, the 3 weeks it took to do this. I can throw maybe an hour's worth of prompts at AI. it could do all of that stuff for us and make it happen within the same day that I attempted it. So I took a 3-week horizon, a 3-week runway, and I shrunk that down to an hour. I can take a game that would have taken me 3 weeks to develop, like we'll say the snake game. Everybody played on their Nokia phone. You use the little arrow keys. You move a snake around. It eats the little fruit things. It grows in length. And think about how much time that took a person to set that game up manually. I can go to an AI right now and say, hey, AI, write me some code that is a snake where segments grow when the snake eats fruit. It moves around a platform. And the goal with the user experience is to orient the snake so that it can eat the fruit and not hit itself, because if it hits itself, the game's over. So it goes and adds, a bunch of code, and I use the code, and it's like, okay, well, that's okay, but here's the changes I want you to make in the code. Now I want you to make the speed variable where it speeds up as time goes on to make it a little bit more challenging. I want the fruit to be more random, randomized, where it appears on the screen, and you keep throwing new prompts, and eventually you're like, in a day, through a series of new instructions to the AI, it did something in a day that it took a person weeks to do. Now, the marketplace is salivating over this innovation. Think of how many things can be created when you shorten the time period that it takes to create it from months down to hours, right? And how many people does that displace? So if I'm a graphics designer or I'm a code writer, if what I did being paid by the hour to do, now this AI can do in a matter of seconds. It doesn't take a rocket scientist or somebody who has specialization in that, because the AI is going to do it on your behalf. So now you have this grouping of code writers and graphics developers. They're like, hey, wait a minute. That's my job. I was doing that. How dare you displace me that way? So the first part is whether or not it's justified in displacing these people in the first place. And the second was, now what the frick do you do? What do you tell them to do? Go learn to what? We told them the code before, and now coding is done by AI. So what do you do with those people? Are those the next homeless people? The people who went and got the education and got the specialization and did the practice and worked years on their craft, and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, AI is going to do your thing now. What do you do with them? And so these are real hard questions about, the benefit is that it's going to happen very slowly, and there are specializations that are going to be or displaced slow. So we have time to think about what we want to do with it. But on the other side of that if it happened quickly, at least we could do something big enough to figure out what we do. The Joe Rogans of the world, and the Elon Musks of the world, and the people who are knee deep into this are going to say, well, there are going to be companies that use AI and they're going to displace workers. And the use of these tools, whether it be robots or AI, we should just regulate it. So the same amount of money that I was paying a manual person to do this, I'm now paying a computer system, and artificially inflate the rate, and then use that money to just then pay people that were doing this job that same money. So I'm a manufacturing facility, and I had 10 employees that were assembling and boxing things up and shipping them out to customers. I have a robot that does it now, where it costs $100,000. So my employees were making 60, and I had 10 of them, so they're making 600,000. And my robot now is 100,000. It can do all their jobs 24 hours a day to the same deal. So the government comes along and says, hey, I'm going to put a tax on your robot of $500,000 per year. Now, from the manufacturer, now it's the same money that it was costing before, but now the government takes the $500,000 and it gives it to the 10 workers, and now they don't have to do anything, right? They just get paid to do nothing. So a future ahead of us where nobody's really doing labor jobs anymore. Everyone is free to be creative and innovate and experiment and whatever. Sounds really nice if you are reading Utopia, but it's completely a culture killer to have people without purpose. Maybe of those 10 people, that are now collecting $100,000, $60,000 check, and they wake up in the morning like, oh, I don't have to go to work today. The money just shows up in my bank account. How many of them will say, ooh, I've got all of this spare time now, and I can go and create? And how many of them are like, all right, I'm going to go game, and I'm going to go on vacation, and I'm going to live my best life. And then does that lead to, and this is where it would be helpful for, psychology and the academics to say, how many of those without an actual 9-to-5 purpose are going to come to the conclusion they need to reinvest that same time that they were in labor and invest it in some kind of creativity, innovation, or something productive? I would say, just Joe's guess, 50%. 50% are going to buy all the booze that you can handle and feed all of their impulses and destroy themselves. And they're going to be the ones that are on the street corners, with mental issues. And 50% are going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to invest 8 hours a day in creating the best music and artwork and next innovations in technology and all of that. And we'll have massive growth in innovations and creativity, while at the same time we have a massive growth in mental illness and people feeding into their temptation. So it's almost like if you engineer this out, the responsibilities are you have to plan for the people who do and the people who don't with the same kind of effort. Because they can't just be a casualty of war and like, oh, okay, well, when there's 50% of the population that are collecting a check and becoming destructive, whatever, well, you can't own a house and have a business and go on vacation if 50% of your countrymen are destructive criminals who are blighting every space that we'd want to visit to or operate business in. You got to plan a little bit better than that. Now, while I don't have the answer because it is a rhetorical and a thought experiment type of question, you have to plan for that. So what before you, spoiler, the genie's out of the bottle. We are already doing it. So the consequence is just a matter of time before that happens. So what sculpts civilization? And rather than waiting for the elusive unicorn of people just discovering morality and good decisions and whatever versus the vices and impulses that are likely to visit them, what's your answer? You're going to have a bunch of money, right, to be able to pull it off, and you're going to have a slow sliver of this happening over a long period of time. What's your move? And until we are putting equal emphasis on developing the technology as we are as fielding the fallout from that technology, then there's going to be a time in the future that we're going to visit. We're not going to like the outcome, and every dumb person who unthoughtfully just decided to proceed, they're going to be surprised and shocked, but it's not going to be a real authentic shock. It's going to be how did that happen? I thought you were going to do that. No, I thought you were going to do that. And we're going to live in a world that is less valuable than it is today. Even though with such a supreme technology, it could have been so much better. It's going to be worse because we did it. We have dumb people in control that couldn't think through the problem. Liam says, if we didn't do this with robots taking over auto jobs, why would we do this for AI? I mean, come on now. That's actually socialism. At least what you all thought socialism was 5 years ago. And you could argue, though, that the flow of this didn't change, right? So where manufacturing switched to automations and the displaced workers that used to do those automations, where did those people go? Well, it was evolved in a sort of like a seasoned industry where a lot of those people could go away into retirements and they could go into other industries because it wasn't universal. Where the auto industry did, there were other companies that didn't, and those skill sets were able to migrate. When you take jobs where you can't retire people and you can't easily lodge them elsewhere. Fortunately, the auto industry was a very lucrative industry. So those people that were displaced, they had it good for a good period of time. And so it wasn't as, abrupt. But you take look at Las Vegas, for instance. Las Vegas is changing. Why? Because the competition for what Las Vegas did is at an all-time high. And you have people who were in those industries that no longer will be in those industries in the future. Why? Because you don't have to travel to a city that did gambling. Gambling's freaking everywhere. And the more states that allowed gambling to happen with their own casinos meant that there were going to be less people that hopped on a plane and went to casinos in Las Vegas. The entertainment value, where you can get your dopamine hit once a year, go to Las Vegas and get something that you could get nowhere else. Think of what Las Vegas offered and things that you just can't get anywhere else. It's a very limited list. So it lost its advantage. So it was up to Las Vegas to retool itself, knowing that there was heavy competition for the reasons why people came to you, and you need to retool. Well, what happens to the workers who are in those industries? If the industries don't retool, that means that you're going to have an erosion of tourists, and then the people who end up paying the largest price are the service workers who are now completely displaced. Now, I'm still pretty hopeful that because not all of our industries are dominated with AI, there are still places to go. So a lot of those will. But I'm painting the picture where AI is so prevalent that you can't go somewhere and not compete with it, where it's been displaced. The numbers are in such high volume that you can't easily move those people to different places. And that is the dystopian outcome that is a certainty if we stay on this path. Julie says, what would you create if you were displaced? Human beings are adaptable, right? So you sort of have these two warring tribes, right? You have the highly adaptable people who you could pick them up by their head and take them anywhere else, and they'll figure it out, right? They have the mental capacity, they have the sort of like the fortitude to be able to take on frictions and hard things and make it work no matter where they're at. I don't care if you were in one field and all of a sudden that disappears. You were in sales, and then so you go to another place, you jump on your covered wagon, you fight off some Indians, and you in the new place, you look around and find out, how can I make it here, even if I have to get good at different things. So let's just say the 50% tribe of adaptable people are there. Now, 50% of the people are there are your non-risk takers, the people who are like, they're forever people, right? They get a job, they work the job, they do the job, they build a family and whatever. The traditionalists, they fear change. They're really low beta people. Those are the people that I don't know what to do with. They're not adaptable. So if you take everything away from them, you put them on the island and they just die, right? They don't have it in them where they feared it. They put all of their energy into conserving what they had because they are not able to just conform to a new space, and you just die. So you got to think of tribe B as the ones you need to put your emphasis in. How do you then go to a person that worked 30 years in one industry, tell them that everything they know is going away, and say, just learn to code? It's an unfair ask because they're just not wired that way. And so we came from, the industrial age where you can go to high school, find out that you weren't going to, do A, B, and C, but you could totally do D, E, and F. Well, there was a huge demand of D, E, and F. I could just go to a mill. I could just do labor jobs, and I will, rather than using my intellect to do something, I use my work hours and my, strong back. Well, then that erodes, and what do you do with those people? Where can they find, a place? So I don't have an answer at all, and I don't think anybody really does. All I know is that shift is going to make it apparent that if we don't plan through that, those are the people that are going to be purposeless. They're going to have mental issues. They're going to be next generation's criminals, and they're going to destroy whatever golden ivory towers that we're able to formulate because of our sophistication, but because we didn't plan on what we were going to do with them when we displaced them. And I think that is surely on the so if AI's development is technology and engineering and electricity generation, it is also equally as important to plan through those people as a cost of this technology, just as much as, birthing it or creating it. Julie also says there's a lot of produce rotting in the fields of California that needs picked. And that may be. We might find that there are industries that absolutely need labor that they didn't have access to. And, once the Trump administration gets rid of the illegal people, maybe the rotting crops that are out there, somebody says, hey, you know what? I've got availability and I've got a strong back and, I could totally do that. So the people that you had rotting cabbage in a field are like, oh, you mean I'm going to have to pay an American that has a strong back to do this, and I can't pay them $4 an hour under the table anymore. I've got to pay them $25 an hour, and then they factor that into agriculture and the cost of the product, and what shows up on your grocery store shelves costs more than it did before. And other countries who still have, immigrant labor, slave labor, are able to do it for $4 an hour, and the grocery store has to then choose between a $25 head of cabbage and a $4 head of cabbage. You can see how this goes south really quick, because we're picking a snapshot in time and saying it's not just there's no way that any of these problems are solved with a binary decision. It is 100% going to take the finesse of smart people to figure this out, where all people are made whole, not just the worker and not just the consumer and not just the provider, but everybody's got a stake in this, so that, did we benefit from slave labor before? When I buy $1,000 phone and find out that this thing should cost $3,000, and I've been getting away with $1,000 because I was leveraging slave labor to get it. When you actually take authentic labor and build it in this phone that costs $3,000, I'm going to say, I can't afford a $3,000 phone. You can't just charge me $3,000 after you have been charging $1,000. But then the adaptable people will say, oh, okay, well, iPhones are going to be $3,000 now. I'm going to make a phone that might not have everything that you had before. But if the goal is to give you something within your price point that was adequate to how you use the phone, now we have an innovator in a different space, not giving you everything you want and desire and bells and whistles that are, way beyond what the average user uses anymore. Maybe you push back what consumers are willing to buy, and you create industries that are below premium. You just have to write yourself. Is it worth experiencing a premium product, right, that was cost effective, but only made that way because of slave labor? You wouldn't be able to morally be able to justify it, or, in good conscience, be willing to deal with it. You would have to make concessions in one department. Either I pay the premium for the premium, knowing that none of this, none of the stuff in this phone was leveraging slave labor, or I got to dial back and deal with a less premium product that authentically had legal, well-paid labor in it. And that's just the end of it. So if, let's just say we put tariffs on all products that basically make all foreign goods cost equal to everything that you buy in the States. That would be a one-for-one authentic cost, because here we pay labor, United States labor, they're not regulated, don't pay the same labor stakes that we do, and have all of these advantages. So I then have to say, if I'm a good person, I don't want to take polluting the environment and slave labor as a consequence for me to get a better deal on this phone. And to Liam's point, that we have taken things that we don't believe in, and we've almost expected them and think we're entitled to those things. So, do you think that, okay, if you pit these two things against one another, do you think companies make too much money? Second question, do you think labor makes too much money? And if we decided to say Apple Computer, instead of 100% markup, I'm going to force you to do a 50% markup. And the cost of goods come down because we force the company to make 50% less profits. And we did the same thing to labor. You're making $30 an hour. I'm going to force you to come down 50% on the labor costs. Now, you basically controlled the formula on both sides of the equation. You made the product cost more because you forced labor to make less money, and you forced the company to charge less money. And if the phone then gets cut in half, but you make half the amount of money, so instead of $30 an hour, you make $15 an hour, but your $3,000 phone it costs $1,500, and you make it proportionally deflated on both sides of things, so long that companies don't get greedy and labor doesn't get greedy, then we can lower those costs to be more competitive with outside fields. You as a stockholder and a 401k holder, do you want Apple then to make more money so that it ends up in your retirement account, right? And as the producer, do you want the labor to make more money so they can buy more consumer goods? So it takes like these unbiased versions of it and weight both sides of the equation. So we're not pro-labor and we're not pro-business. We are not anti-labor and anti-business. Both sides of them play a crucial role in what happens next. And you both have to be have to have a unbiased person fairly arbitrating that number down to a lower number, or at least proportionally growing that number over time. Is it slave labor or labor that is being paid commensurate with the cost of living in that country? And it could be that, I had a friend, he was a chemist, and he and I worked on a bunch of product developments, and he operated in California, and he developed powders, sort of these. It's hard to articulate and explain, but anyway, the overall product was he developed them in California. So he paid California regulations, he paid California raw materials, he paid California labor rates to develop this product. And when he went to market on this product, he had to charge $30, we'll say, per container of this product that he developed. And then he found out that South America existed. And if he went to South America, he went and made California money. He made, I think, 15 or 16% profit margin on his product. He sold it for about 3 years. He made a healthy dose of, paying back his investment on creating this product. And he was like, oh, I made $2 million. I'm going to go to Indonesia. All right. And I'm going to have somebody I knew down there that helped me get, some of my products sold in Indonesia. They're going to vouch for me in that government. And then I'm going to go down there and I'm going to look at labor costs and say, holy crap, these people are willing to work way less than in California. And raw materials. Oh my goodness. Like I could buy these raw materials like 1/10 of what I could in the United States. And then regulations. There are none. Like I can do whatever I want. They don't really care at all what I do to the environment or whatever. I'm going to go to Indonesia. I'm going to do the same thing that I did in California. And my profit margins, now if I sell to the United States, I shrunk my margins, or I shrunk my operating and development costs on this product down to less than 10% of what it was when I developed it in California. And then, because I'm South America, I could actually sell to the United States, same exact freaking product. And instead of 15% profit margin, I have an 80% profit margin. Why would I not do that all day long? So the temptation for developers to operate in, sort of like environments that allow such gross huge profit margins, why would you not do that? And at the same time, guess what happened when it came to taxes? Taxes were minuscule. And you could buy a house, instead of it costing you $2,000 a month, it would cost you $50 a month or $100 a month, because you were dealing with low cost of living, low cost of labor, low cost of supplies. So what does that do to Indonesia? It props them up and allows whatever they do to raise money. Third world countries and industries that are behind where we're at, it helps them to develop. So what we probably did to countries during our industrial revolution, other countries then are doing to our industrial revolution, and we're paying into those economies to develop them up and make Indonesia strong, and giving that dude for sure an advantage, and could give low cost of. So if that dude, instead of a 15% margin, let's just say it costs $30, and he shrunk his profit, or he grew his profit margin 80%. So of that $30, he was almost making $10 of profit margin on every product. Let's just say he was like, I feel kind. I'm going to sell into the United States, and what used to cost consumers was $30. I'm going to cut my margin down and just make it 50%. I'm still making a better profit margin than operating out of California. The consumer then only has to pay $15 rather than $30. They love it, because now a product that used to cost them $30 was $15, and we leveraged it so long that dude wasn't breaking any laws or taking advantage of slave labor or polluting in the environment. The consumers could easily get addicted to it. But was it an authentic cost? Let's just say Trump puts a tariff on Indonesia, and they make a 1-for-1. So when this dude sells back to the United States, it cost whoever bought it $15 on top of what the wholesale cost was. And on the market, it's still $30 again, right? And so at least it puts consumers and creates the willingness to compete against this product, because the Indonesia made one is $30 and the one that's made in the United States is $30. And I would rather support a US company than an Indonesian company. Now the leverage and the temptation is to bring his company back to the United States, because his disadvantage is lost. Now, in this case, there's not any chance whatsoever that this dude comes back to the United States, because every dollar that he made while he was in California will allow him to live super comfortably in Indonesia for the rest of his life. And even if he only makes 15% down in Indonesia, he'll do that forever. So that battle has been lost long ago to bring that industry back to the United States. So let's see. Carter Stone said in California, it was illegal to hire individuals who are not authorized to work in the United States. If you're a company, you can be fined from $200 to $2,000 per worker. My fear with that, though, is that administrations and law enforcement and Department of Justice were kind of given the license to turn a blind eye to those people. Either, for one thing, either your politics say that you don't want to disenfranchise illegal immigrant workers, or companies who are making big bank on using illegal labor in the industry that they are. So if you're a politician, you're playing this really dynamic game where you're going to make somebody mad no matter what you do. So it's almost like you have to play the status quo, or else you got a consequence to be able to do that. So we're nice to say that companies were fined. I'd love to see the data to find out how many of those industries actually had to pay those fines, in California. Because my guess is, and this is just Joe's opinion, is that I bet you that didn't happen very often. And if it happened at all, it was a token gesture to say, see how it wasn't a strongly enforced policy. Julie says greed is the bottom line for most companies. It's an original sin since the Adam and Eve. And I would say workers are the same thing. You have to say that companies aren't the only ones that are exposed to greed. Politicians, greed. Laborers, greed. Individuals, greed. Churches, greed. Everybody's greed. So it's not that you pick the thing like greed and only target one audience. Target everyone. And the end result is when you start unraveling the fabric of morality, you end back at religion, because religion's really the only organization that systematically martyrs themselves for the principle. and stays consistent that the sin is what's wrong, and it's not that we pick our favorite sinner and that's the one we target. So I'll agree with you. Companies can be greedy as individuals, as all those other categories that I cited are also equally as greedy. As more of those agnostics and atheists and secularists are amongst us, greed takes a bigger hold on all of our institutions because now there's no consequence. Would I rather have someone who's afraid of greed and therefore, even though they might do it, know that they're probably going to burn in hell for greed? Or do you think it's just the people who are agnostic or secularists who are like, oh, greed, there's no consequence unless I get caught. Let me do as much greed and then find out that the only greedy people that we go after are companies. And so, yeah, I agree with you, Julie. But I don't know. That was a long diatribe. And I got to move on from the greediness of, AI and what it, but I mention it often enough. And I did this on my tech show. I told you all what was going to happen. I told you all if you let the genie out of the bottle, what was going to happen. I told you all if it's not engineered correctly, it's going to be a curse rather than a blessing. And this is just one in a many lines that you as a consumer are in control of this. And if you don't band together and decide how you're going to treat it, you're not going to expect companies to do the right thing. Companies do not have a soul. They are going to go after the dollar because we reward them and almost make it legally 100% chance that they are going to try to make as much money as they possibly can, and only doing things, ethics and morals are only going to be in line with what they have to do, not what they want to do. They will only follow. I mean, we saw with DEI, right? We saw companies chasing what was virtuous only based on the public pressures of what they had to do. We had some companies go full bore and do what they knew would be rewarded culturally from consumers. And then now that and look at it, if you take a Disney, for instance, if you take a Disney who went full out woke, and there were the group of people and the media and everybody who laid on how awesome this was, and they had a bunch of sales on it, and they got rewarded because they were virtuous. And then culture kind of shifted and said, well, we don't kind of want the woke anything. And then they look at the red ink on their balance or their profit margins and how consumers are supporting them. Are they still willing to go woke when there isn't a financial advantage to go woke? They've got this barometer and they're going to follow what they're rewarded for. So it's easier to punish companies and change their behaviors. It is harder to punish consumers to change their behaviors. So if I wanted to right all the consumers, I would give advantage to companies to do the right thing. And I would and I'm not talking cancel culture, but I'm talking like prohibitive. Do not spend money with people you disagree with, and watch companies look to serve you in the way that makes them more money so they can reward their shareholders and their directors. Carter says, true, California does not enforce any laws. You can steal anything as long as it's under $900. And that is 100% the true. Politicians put up a good front that they are, for the rule of law. But when it comes down to it, they're fungible, right? They are super willing to push on the limits of, excuse this, that lawbreaker, regular citizen, totally go to prison. Donor breaks the law. Well, let's make it a little easier on that dude. Oh, the guy that sits with me in Congress breaks the law. Let's go really easy on him. So yeah, thank you, Carter. I appreciate it. And as promised, I'm going to move on from this a little bit. A little local politics here. This has grinded my gears a little bit, and just the way that it goes down, it seems like Youngstown politics always has a habit of embarrassing me when it comes to dealing with sophisticated things. But there is a company that they're operating in other parts of the country. And what they do is they take refuse tires, old rubber, and they contain the tires, use high pressure, high energy combustion, and they use that combustion to create energy. And so down here in Youngstown, a small facility, I think it was more of a proof of concept facility. Went through the process of putting a facility, getting EPA to sign off on it that it was a safe thing. And all of us kind of watched as the entire city rooted and pushed against the innovations in electricity here in Youngstown. So we have a lot of refuse tires that are going in landfills, and some companies are chopping them up and using it as a landscape for, parks and stuff like that. But for the most part, we've got a lot of refuse. We create a lot of rubber tires, and they're sitting in piles elsewhere. We don't know what to do with them. So a company comes along and says, I'm going to try to make that into energy, and I'm going to try to do it as safe as possible. And if the EPA comes along and says, yeah, this doesn't look like it's a direct, disruption to your local ecology. You're not going to do pollution. You're not running anything off the rivers. You don't have anything going in the air that is above minimum. Signed off, green check mark. EPA says it's golden. But then your city administrators come to their own opinion and taking the science and saying, well, no, this is going to pollute. Even though the EPA says it's within line of the EPA, we're going to say it is going to pollute. We don't want those jobs, right? We take an industry that's willing to take a risk in your community. And what do? You gang tackle them, put a moratorium on the development of this industry. So if the city of Youngstown doesn't want people to innovate, what do you freaking want? What are the industries? Do you want an Amazon like what we did out in where was that? Lake Milton, Lordstown, wherever this stinking thing was. Did we embrace it and say, no, we want your labor jobs and shipping and distribution? Do we want your warehousing for, the home warehouse? We haven't figured out as a community what the frick we want. Do we want technology? Do we want industry? Do we want heavy? Do we want labor? What it is that we want? Because it seems like everything that comes into town, we take aim at and we do our best to make it as hard as freaking possible to actually happen here. Like, why can't we just be entrepreneurial minded? And when anyone takes interest in them, we're like, come on, we don't have to be pushovers. We don't have to be bootlickers. We don't have to be someone who's willing to, trade our principles for something to come in town. But why do we have to be so obstinate for anybody who freaking looks at us? There's going to be a point where we're going to be so radioactive to the business community that they're not going to want to deal with us because there's 1,000 easier places than us. We're not going to look at that Youngstown because they're a little bunch of bitches who all they do is whine and complain every time and have some kind of negative angle on anything we bring to town. We couldn't bring an ice cream facility without somebody saying, we got too many ice creams, or they have the wrong flavors, or they're only hiring people with blonde hair. Like, there's nothing that will make us happy. So as a community, we have to decide what it is we freaking want, what it is that we're willing. So if we don't want energy, we don't want technology, we don't want labor, fine. Pick something and go all in on it. And then we can easily market to those industries. Say, come, hey, you know what? You're our favorite. Come to town. And when we come in front of city council, we're not looking to destroy you or making your life hard or trying to extort you. We want you to succeed in our town because we want to be the ice cream town. So all ice cream industries, come here. We want you. But I can't convince the public to all go in line. I can't convince politicians to all get in line. There's so much infighting and ego and corruption that nobody can decide what it is that we want to bring into our community. As long as that's happening, I'm not putting myself on the hook for any of these bastards. All they're going to do is embarrass me. I'm going to say, oh, Amazon, no, you come to town and you're going to put 1,000 jobs in our community, and you're going to have union employees building the facility, and they're going to pay taxes on things. Come on, I got you. And then I'm going to take all of my political capital and go to the consumers and say, dude, I got their attention. I'm bringing them to town. And then there's going to be some assholes picketing and some councilman trying to extort them for more tax money, and some regulator trying to, get some paybacks on there. I mean, I would never in a million years go to bat for anybody in this community if it means my reputation is going to vouch for this community. I don't believe in any of those groups enough to know that you're not going to look to embarrass me the first chance that you get. So that's why we sort of need a leader within those industries within government to decide what we want and keep all of your cats in control, right? And as much as they want to stray, like it's basically it's a free for all. So we like, for instance, it's a free for all where every group that somehow gets butthurt is allowed to be amplified through our media, and all the attention gets put up. I could say I'm going to do a hunt in Mill Creek Park, and you're going to have a dozen people protesting and trying to get in the way. I could put the airbase and put immigrants on flights out of this country, and you're going to have protests. No matter what, the protest industry and the stalling industry and the getting in the way of innovations industry is huge business in our area. And it makes it incredibly hard to get something done when it's so much easier elsewhere. Do you think if I took company XYZ that wants to manufacture widgets, do you think it would be easier for me to go to Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, and get my company, let's just say I'm brokering this deal. I have Nashville, Tennessee to choose from, and I have Youngstown, Ohio to choose from. And I'm sitting in the boardroom and saying, who's our best candidate? Who's our best suitor for bringing your facility? Here's what's going to happen if you bring it to Youngstown. Here's the pushback you're going to get. Here's how much the community is going to support you. Here's Nashville. Here's the pushback you're going to get. Here's how the community is going to embrace you. Here's what's in store. If they were picked and you're a terrible suitor, if I'm a politician and I don't get picked, I'm the leader. I'm going to go to my community and say, hey guys, here's the deal. We're not even on the grid. Here's the reason why. This is going to be, I'm going to be bad cop. I'm going to be tough love. And I'm going to tell you why people pass on us. And if you want people to choose us, this is how you have to be. And if you want people to pass on us, just keep acting like you are. And it's going to be my administration's main priority to get the community in line, so we're not a bunch of ignorant people who just want to obstruct everything that happens. Because if you're 80 years old and you just want the status quo and you've got yours and you want to take, my 15-year-old or a 20-year-old that's trying to make its way up, and they see all of the opportunities in your community and they're like, oh yeah, I'm not staying here. I'm going to a different community, one that isn't brain dead, one that isn't going to get in its own way every step of the way. Governments that make dumb decisions and are corrupt and just scrape money off for themselves and don't make good decisions for the citizens of the cities that they serve. And you have the old people who won't part with a tax dollar or develop city services or invest in what's innovations are going to happen. Yeah, I don't want to be there. I want to be a more progressive community that isn't brain dead. I'm going to call it brain dead because that's effectively what it is. So anyway, that's the, I think it's SOBI plan that's down here. So if you're a reasonably minded person in our community and you want to see innovations, I don't want you to just blindly support them. I want you to look into them and see what they're really all about. Vocalize, be louder than, if you support them, I want you to be louder than the media who's going to admonish them, the city council who's going to admonish them, citizens who don't have a freaking clue what they're talking about, admonishing them. Be a little bit louder than those people, because our media in this area, they don't really, there are very few that actually have a brain, right? They're not writing these stories and taking the opposition the way. They're a barometer just like everybody else who's finding the political winds of what's popular and what gets people whatever, and they're just parroting, they're just parroting the views of the populist opinion. Right, just like companies can be controlled by shifting the populist movement, the media too will shift with that populist movement. I used to think there was a vast conspiracy and there was a controlling force that made the media say what it said. And now I believe really that they're just not real smart and really don't have put a lot of priority into writing informational stories to inform the public. They're just moving with the river of popular opinion. And wherever that dudes, I'm telling you, every morning I look at what is trending on Google and I try to line up with what I talk about with what's trending, right? And basically what trend does is what people are interested in, what people are clicking on, what people are responding, what people are mad about, what people are happy about. And those trendings are the top 100 trending thing. I want you to look at it. I want you to go to Google Trends trending now, right? I want you to Google that. And I want you to really take and try to have an intellectual debate on anything that's in that top 100. Every morning, there's about 10% of the trending topics that are interesting from an informational and things that actually matter on that list. 90% are the brain dead topics that have everybody getting dopamine and everybody arguing. And I guess it's fun. Think about it. If 90% of the people that are voting alongside you are interested in the most brain dead topics, and the media is responding to delivering brain dead news articles, what do you think you're going to experience in a brain dead society with brain dead media and brain dead voters and a brain dead culture? It's going to be a pretty brain dead experience. And so if I'm an intellectual and I actually care about things, I'm going to freaking go elsewhere. I would rather go to an island of 4 people where at least the brain dead people are maybe 25% and escape the idiocy that all of us are participating every day. We get sucked into all this idiocy. Tracy Randall says, Youngstown runs on government handouts for being filled with crime, poverty, and unhealthiness. See greed and the skim. It's absolutely true. And this is no lie. I'm just not being dramatic because I'm in the business scene. But I believed in entrepreneurship in the area. I really did. I thought it was a bunch of people that over a meal had a really good idea. They thought through how they're going to take this idea and put it out into the marketplace. And through the quality of their services or product, invite the public to support what it is that they were doing. And the really good ideas got support from the public. And the really bad ideas got punished out of business. And everything was an authentic capitalist approach, right? That was the utopia that I believed in as a kid. And that's why I got involved in business. And I actually got involved in business. And what I started seeing was there were a lot of my competitors that got some pretty sweet deals that I didn't have access to. And they held in complete hostage. It wasn't about quality of products and services. It was about who you held hostage. So I might go to a new customer and says, hey, and I might say to them, hey, I can do services better than whoever's doing your stuff right now. Would you give me a shot at it? And the companies would actually benefit from having someone willingness to give them an improvement on what they're getting now. And those companies could not bring their business to me because they would be going against this groove, this rut of compromised dealers, right? These corrupted dealers that they had to do business with because they were doing business with them. So in the beginning, it made it really difficult to get new customers because everybody was not vouched for in a way that there's no way that anybody can improve my quality of products and services. But I was beholden of the network of people who held me hostage there. So what Tracy said is you have, and before I go into that, even today, government handouts were so prolific that most of my competitors were putting an emphasis on government grants and government handouts rather than direct addressing consumer needs. So I am 100% consumer needs. Every one of my customers can break up with me anytime they want, right? None of the money that goes into my checking account comes from government at all. 100% of it comes $0 come from government grants. So government grants work this way. So some legislator puts together a program that they want to see something in the marketplace. So let's just say there are an unrepresented group of people that they feel are getting shafted in a certain industry. So let's pick computer repair people, right? So we look around the computer repair people and we're like, wow, there are not a lot of Latino computer people. And a legislator says, you know what? We want to have Latino repair people. They're underrepresented in the computer repair people. So they will issue a grant. And what happened was Latinos who want to be in computer repair can go to the government, get a check to start their business, and they are now in the computer repair field. So now I have a Latino who their entire revenue stream is what they get from the government competing against me. Do you feel like they might have an advantage over someone who's authentically every day going to consumers and worried only about the products and services? Or do you think the Latino, who they don't really have to even do computer repair, they can sit at home, get their subsidy, and they only have to hit the requirements of the grant that they brought in? So maybe the grant says that you have to go out in the field and you do X, Y, Z, and you have to be compliant with your grant by doing what? Do you think they're going to go beyond X, Y, Z? Now, I'm sure there's a certain amount of them that this is the perfect subsidy to do it the legitimate way, and this was seed money to become a computer repair. Is it fair to me to now have to compete by someone who is funded by the freaking government? And while that's great, we need more of all persuasions in the computer repair field. Legitimate computer repair. What if computer repair company is terrible at it? And there's no downside, because even if they're fired, they are still successful. They can participate in the economy the same way that how do you get rid of someone who has their whole revenue source coming from the federal government? You can't. Now, what if it's a limited field where there's only 100 customers in your area? Now, 50% of them you give up to the person that doesn't even have to compete in the revenue stream. Now, I go out of business doing it the authentic way, and all you're left with is the people who are taking corrupt money from the government to do a job that has no authenticity in the actual environment. That is a hijacked, corrupt formula. So I believe in using subsidy money to get something started where it's not, but not directly competing with people who are actually. So what Tracy said is that government sees us, taxpayers, as a revenue stream. They're not worried about putting good government products and services on the marketplace and be elected because of how good they are doing that. They're looking to see how many more revenue streams they can create. If they can create them by those inauthentic networks where it's like, and I dealt with this, and Niles was a bitch. It was the worst government that I've ever had to deal with. Okay, so if the Niles government, and let's take emphasis off Niles government, because I don't know if they're corrupt. I haven't dealt with Niles in a while, so I don't want to take the current administrations and hold them in contempt for what I've experienced in the past. So what would you say? Let's just say the government mandated, right? Let's just say, not even a government. Let's just say somebody mandate. I'm going to mandate that every year you have to have something inspected, right? So in the spirit of what that mandate is, whatever they're mandating is probably pretty important. We don't want to have fires. We don't want to have floods. We don't want to have something. So they can get away with, from a political standpoint, that the origin of the regulation was that we didn't want to have X. But now here's where the fun comes. Should you then, if I had a business in a city that mandated that I had to have something done on a regular basis, should I be able to pick my provider? Like, I could go to my friend who does this for a living and fulfill the requirement. Or what if the city had to authorize a service provider and they only authorized one company? So I can mandate a service be done, and I can pick who's going to provide that service, and then there's no competition, so they can charge whatever the frick they want. So I could take something that my buddy can do for $25, but if I have to service the regulation, I now have to pay $800 for something that should cost $25. And now the government's like, oh, dude, John's service provider, I'm going to make it so that every customer has to come through you. All I need you to do is I want to make sure that you know where your bread is buttered. All you got to do is make a contribution, a political contribution to my campaign, and we can keep this machine flowing. So now John charges the $25 service, but he charges $800. He gives $400 back to the politician so that they keep making him the only service provider that's allowable. John keeps $400 for himself on a service that the marketplace would be $25. And this is an illustration of what happens with government. You can scale this to every place that a government touches, and you will find this formula works no matter what. And I'm just lowly entrepreneur, right? Here's two important things that I agree with when it comes to business and how things should work. Number one, I need to be able to break up with you any chance I get. Anything in government needs to be break upable. So if you do a good job, I keep you around. If you don't do a good job, you're gone. So anybody who's insulated from the breakup is corrupted the process. So think about it. Let's just say the IRS does a bad job. How can you break up with them? What if you could break up with them? What if they can disappear tomorrow? What if the person is not doing a good job on roads? You can just fire them. What if a mayor isn't doing a job and fire them? So we have elements where you can break up, but there's corruption below those elements that is exactly unbreakupable. So in a perfect world, to hit my first law of principle, so if you create a regulation that stops a fire hazard, right? And it would ultimately be that anybody can hire someone to satisfy that and a 0% chance of corruption. You get 27 providers who can all charge whatever they want to charge, and it could be anywhere from $25 to $300 if they feel like it. Me as a consumer, I can choose whichever one I want. Low chance of corruption. One provider has a high level of corruption. And so, like Tracy had said, Youngstown has just become where the media and politicians pit the consumers against industry. We took capitalism and entrepreneurship and we bastardize it so that it seems like a bad thing. And we basically gang tackle anybody who wants to do something. And maybe it's philosophical. I know people that I'll formulate a brand new idea and it's in its infancy, and I'll tell them about it, and they will tell me 1,000 ways why it's not going to work. So maybe you have just a class of people who, no matter what you say it's not going to work. And that's fine. I mean, consumers, but it'd almost be like if I were the media and my product was to inform the public, I would not want anyone to think that either I was pro something or against something. I would want to be hard to figure out whether or not I'm an advocate or an adversary of something. But if I'm always on the side of X and I'm always against the side of Y, it'd be pretty easy to show something and say, hey, so you're NPR, right? Did you know that everybody who works there is a Democrat? That might look bad if you want people to believe that you're unbiased. Or all the guests, you have 85% of the guests that come on your show, they're all Democrats. So when somebody looks at that and says whether or not you're biased on, it's going to be pretty easy to tell that you're going to be biased. Or if you have articles that say Trump sucks 50% of the time, and you also had Joe Biden sucks 50% of the time. When I look at those stats, it's like, you're pretty even keeled. You're pretty mean to politicians, but at least 50% of the time, you're equally as adversarial with that group. But if you're skewed on the 90%, people are going to wonder whether or not the information that comes out of your face hole really is there to inform versus advocate. Or if you're at university and every kid that comes out of university is all, woke liberals. There's some evidence to say maybe that the professors are too liberal. Maybe the structure of your curriculum is too liberal. Let's try to make it difficult to measure whether or not you are a liberal institution or not. And if you do that, then you have 50% of the people that come out there that come out of your school that happen to be Republicans. Now it could go the other way. I'm picking on liberals because they've captured every institution that I could name. And I want to pay attention to this because a lot is going to come out in the next couple of months about the grading, the report card of what we were able, or the Trump administration was able to take away from liberal slant. You got to think of it. Okay, so if the media was captured by Democrats, and then all of a sudden it swings back and that capture is gone. It's going to be painful for Democrats as they watch some of their power controls erode a little bit, but you're going to feel a little bit better when, if you think of liberal versus of conservative media, you can think of just as many liberals media outlets as you could Republicans. Or if there's a subsidy that's given out, you can measure and find that there are 50% that are giving to conservative causes as there are of liberal causes. That'd be pretty equal, right? But I believe, and the gerrymandering thing is another institution that's going to be broken and shored up. I believe that we broke NGOs, we broke government institutions being able to give Democrats an advantage. We're breaking the Department of Justice and going after Republicans and laying down cover fire for Democrats. We're breaking liberal institutions through DEI, but eventually that no advantage is given to a public school that actually has some kind of political bent. We're getting rid of PBS and NPR that also have a liberal bent. We're getting rid of the voting blocks that give Democrats in the end, if we get rid of corruption and we end up that Republicans are skewed with a major authentic advantage, where you have to build in advantage if you want Democrats to make it seem like they had an advantage, even voting. Like if you don't think that voting was compromised over the last couple election cycles, you're really a zealot. Where if you make them authentic, where you just make it, you show up, you vote, and Republican things win, and you have to cheat in order to get Democrats to win. Again, like I'd really like to see a 50-50 non-strategic advantage and politics to just come down to talking about philosophies, not hamstringing the controls and environments of politics, really just trying to sell your persuasion. Make it come down to whether or not what you do is objectively good or objectively bad, and have all of your representation based on measurable, objective grading and report cards. And that's my one contemplation. So I had a couple more things written down, but I'm going to sew this up and get on with my day, because I freaking ranted for an hour and 45 minutes. Let's see. Yeah, I don't really want to talk about the rest of the stuff. I'm just going to wrap it up here. Thank you, everybody, for joining me here today. MLO Bros will be back tomorrow. We got a busy week. We got the softball game for charity. We got movie night. We've got a couple other things going on this week. But anyway, busy week. But anyway, have a good day. Thanks for joining us, everybody. See you next time. This has been Youngstown's Talk Channel.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. This is original Youngstown content. Feel free to share our videos and tell your friends about us. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook.